Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something really exciting. We are completely tearing down some long-held historical assumptions. We're going to look at the Faravahar, but absolutely not as a theological construct or some mystical religious symbol. Instead, drawing on some truly fascinating new analysis of the source material, we're exploring it as a rigorous ancient engineering blueprint, literally a schematic for managing human willpower and thermodynamic energy. So get ready, because we're about to look at history through a completely different lens. The core argument we're unpacking today is honestly mind-bending. By stripping away centuries, millennia really, of religious interpretation, what actually emerges from the source material is a foundational fire science. We're talking about a system based entirely on the mechanical, physical laws of energy management. The ancients on the Iranian plateau and the Mesopotamian floodplains, they weren't just praying to a static symbol. They were operating a highly functional thermodynamic machine designed to achieve total individual sovereignty. All right, here's our quick roadmap for today's schematic teardown. We're going to hit the reclassification, the thermodynamic engine, celestial actuators, metallurgical parameters, historical transmission, and finally, climatic obfuscation. Section 1. The reclassification. Let's look at this fire science blueprint. For thousands of years, the Faravahar has been viewed almost exclusively through a religious lens, right? It's been seen as this static idol, completely bound up in mythology and heavy moral dogma. But the source material urges us to deliberately pivot, to recategorize it. When you look at it under an engineering lens, everything changes. It instantly becomes a precise geometric schematic. It literally transforms into a hands-on manual for thermodynamic management and a technical kinetic protocol. It completely redefines the entire purpose of the symbol. Now, to understand how this ancient manual actually worked, we have to talk about the Vesta-Avesta frequency. You've probably heard the traditional term Zend-Avesta before, but the source points out that this was actually a massive historical misunderstanding. In reality, the Avesta was a primary dataset of planetary geometry, and the Zand was the physical, kinetic action required to use it. And here's where it gets crazy. When the modern astronomer Carl Friedrich Gauss discovered the asteroid Vesta back in 1807, he completely unknowingly assigned it a symbol of an altar with a sacred flame, which amazingly perfectly matches this ancient schematic. The true operational system aligns the Avestan dataset directly with the physical frequency of Vesta to literally tune the human internal forge. Section 2. Thermodynamic engine, the circuit of consciousness. Okay, so this right here is the actual engine of human consciousness. The ancients didn't just sit around debating moral philosophies. They mapped human behavior directly to thermodynamics. It's built exactly like a strict mechanical battery cycle. Step 1 is Ormazad, which is all about gathering potential energy, what we've been taught to call the good thought. Step 2 is Ahura Mazda, the moment where source voltage perfectly couples with physical reality. This is the kinetic burst, the good deed. And then step 3 is Ahriman, representing entropy. This is the good word, where that energy disperses and locks the result into the material environment. See, it's not a moral judgment. It's a closed, perfectly logical energy circuit. Section 3, Celestial Actuators. Let's meet the 4 executive governors. So, while the massive, slow-moving planets act as the macro-managers of the broad environment, these 4 specific asteroids function as the active, on-the-ground field technicians. Vesta acts as the sacred hearth, regulating your individual willpower. Pallas is the strategic architect, helping construct the physical deed itself. Juno acts as the juridical actuator, handling all the formal agreements and laws. And Ceres steps in as the biological maintainer, managing natural resources. The ancient technicians were literally monitoring the exact geometric angles of these specific asteroids to know precisely when the thermodynamic work window for human action was opened.
Section 4. Metallurgical parameters. The 7 Ameshesapantan.
And this brilliantly illustrates the old chemistry of the ancient forge. These 7 parameters have traditionally been viewed as divine, angelic entities, but the source completely strips them of that moral fiction to reveal what they actually are, a rigorous, step-by-step metallurgical process. Ahura Mazda is the source voltage. Vohurmanaha is the ignition catalyst. Ashavahista represents thermal equilibrium. Kshatravarya is the actual material transformation. Spenta are mighty axis containment. Think of the refractory lining inside a blazing furnace. Finally, Horvatat represents rapid quenching to lock in molecular hardness, and Emeritat is the tempering phase for long-term resilience. You guys, this is a literal, technical blueprint for refining both raw metal and biological life.
Section 5. Historical transmission. How did this fire science actually spread?
The cool thing is, we can meticulously trace how this empirical science was physically preserved across the ancient world. It really kicks off around 3500 BCE with its initial empirical discovery in the Sumerian forge, which is where intense, managed heat was first fully harnessed. By 2500 BCE, we see it codified on the Iranian plateau into that famous tripartite system of thought, word, and deed we just talked about. Fast forward to around 1500 BCE, and this exact fire science migrates right into the Vedic tradition as Agni. And eventually, by 550 BCE, the mighty Achaemenid Empire structurally institutionalized it, literally carving the Faravahar into monumental stone at sites like Persepolis.
Now, a very natural question comes up here. If this was such a hard empirical science, where are the clay tablet instruction manuals? Well, the source analysis explains that this lack of written documentation was actually a deliberate, highly classified security protocol. The raw knowledge of the Vesta frequency was an engineering guild's secret. It was deemed entirely too powerful and frankly too dangerous for public dissemination. So instead of writing it down where it could be stolen, it was transferred chest to chest. They used incredibly precise kinetic rituals and dances performed directly around the hearth. The science was physically embodied to guarantee it couldn't be weaponized or corrupted by bad actors.
Section 6. Climatic Obfuscation, the Erasure of Observational Truth.
So how does a dominant world-spanning science like this just disappear? According to the analysis, it didn't just fade away naturally over time. It was actively targeted. Severe, abrupt environmental shifts. We're talking catastrophic weather and intense, prolonged cooling on the Iranian plateau and the Near East created massive, widespread societal disruption. And this climate disaster created a huge political vacuum. The source makes a compelling argument that this sudden vulnerability allowed opportunistic, dogmatic figures to politically mobilize a desperate, starving populace simply by pointing fingers. They blamed the sacred fire and the ancient technologies of the forge for the terrible weather.
The explainer lays out this sequence of collapse perfectly. Step 1, you have the climatic catastrophe. Severe cooling and drought throw society into chaos. Step 2, dogmatic doomsayers ascend to power by scapegoating the scientists and their forged technology. Step 3 is the truly tragic part, the deliberate archive destruction, the systematic burning of global knowledge centers. And finally, step 4 is what the source calls dogmatic cannibalism. In the massive vacuum left behind by those destroyed archives, emerging power structures simply took the surviving, highly technical thermodynamic vocabulary and repurposed it. They cannibalized it into restrictive, binary moral systems, effectively hiding this incredible science right in plain sight for centuries. And this leaves us with a truly massive, disruptive paradigm shift. Think about it. If the source material is right, and the entire foundation of ancient willpower was actually a measurable, geometric thermodynamic circuit, well, it forces us to ask a huge question. What other mechanical truths are we currently misreading as just silly ancient myth? Are we literally surrounded by the brilliant blueprints of our ancestors, simply lacking the proper engineering lens to read them? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this completely changed how you look at the ancient world. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.